Ambassador HFY stood in the empty hallway and felt cold. The human embassy on Nexus Prime had been full of noise just 3 months ago. Now it was quiet like a tomb. His forearms hung at his sides as he walked through rooms that still smelled like human coffee and the strange flowers they kept in pots. The Veletarian diplomat had visited this place many times over the past 5 years. He remembered how the humans always seemed busy. They talked fast and moved faster. Their ambassador Sarachan would offer him that bitter drink they loved and ask too many questions about trade routes and security reports HFY had found. It annoying then. Now he missed it. He stopped at what used to be Chun's office. The desk was clean, the walls were bare. Even the strange human art was gone. Only one thing remained, a small data pad sitting in the center of the empty desk like a final goodbye.zex, single quotes HAI picked up the device with one of his thin fingers. The message was short and written in the simple trade language all Council species used. We hereby formally withdraw from the Galactic Council. Do not follow us, humanity, that was it. No explanation, no angry words, no demands. Just a quiet exit from the most powerful government in the galaxy. 3 months ago, every human ship had left Council space in a single day. Not just the military vessels or the trade ships, everything, passenger liners, cargo haulers, research ships, even the small personal craft that humans use to visit other worlds. They all simply vanished into the deep space beyond the outer territories. The other council members had been happy at first. HFY remembered the emergency session where they discussed the human departure. Chancellor Vorthak of the Kalari. Hegemony had actually laughed. Good riddance, the old insect had clicked through his translator. Now we can run things properly, most of the council agreed. Humans had always been different. They asked uncomfortable questions during meetings. They refused to follow the old protocols that had worked for thousands of years. Worst of all, they treated all species as equals. It was disturbing to watch a human talk to a Graxoni slave caste worker the same way. They talked to a council chancellor. The humans also had strange ideas about individual rights and democratic voting. They wanted every species to have an equal voice in council decisions, not just the ancient ruling castes. They pushed for something they called representative government, where common citizens could choose their leaders. Such ideas were dangerous and disruptive to the natural order. For 5 years, the council had been slowly reducing human influence. Committee positions that humans once held were given to more traditional species. Human proposals were voted down or delayed in endless debates. Many council members had been planning to formally expel humanity within the next few cycles. The humans had simply saved them the trouble. HFY walked to the large window that faced the Nexus Prime spaceport. Even from the embassy tower, he could see the problem starting. 3 ships sat dark on landing pad 7. They were Thaxoni cargo vessels that had been waiting for human repair crews for 2 weeks. The crews never came. Now the ships sat broken while their Thaxoni owners tried to find other technicians who understood the complex systems. The communication networks were having problems too. Small glitches at first, messages arriving late or getting scrambled. Between species, the human technicians who maintained the quantum relay stations had all left with the rest of their people. The other species were learning that keeping the galaxy connected was harder than it looked, but these were minor issues, the council told itself. Temporary problems that would be solved once proper order was restored. The galaxy had managed without humans for millions of years before they joined the council. It would manage again, HFY was not so sure. He had worked closely with the humans during trade negotiations with the outer colonies. He knew they did more than just ask annoying questions and push for democratic reforms. They were everywhere. In the galaxy's daily operations, human ships carried goods between worlds that had refused to trade with each other for centuries. Human diplomats solved disputes that other species could not resolve. Human engineers designed systems that somehow worked better than anything the older species had created. A soft chime from his personal communicator broke his thoughts. Chancellor Vorthak's voice crackled through the device. HFY, report to the council chambers immediately. We have a situation. The Veletarian diplomat took one last look at the empty office. He placed the datapad back on the desk exactly where he had found it. Something told him it would be important later, the council. Chambers were in chaos when Zexai arrived. Representatives from 12 species were all talking at once while Chancellor Vorthok tried to maintain order with loud clicks of his mandibles. The large display screen at the front of the room showed a star map of the outer territories. "What is the situation?" Zexai asked Sub-Chancellor Grimm of the Draconi Republic. The scaled creature's yellow eyes were worried. "The agricultural worlds in Sector 7 are reporting crop failures, total failures across 4 different planets. The local governments are requesting emergency food supplies." Zexai looked at the map. Sector 7 had been one of the most productive farming regions in council space. "What caused the failures?" "That is the problem," Grimm replied. "The Kelari agricultural experts say the soil chemistry has become unbalanced. They do not understand why. The farming methods have not changed." Another council member nearby laughed bitterly. "The methods have not changed, but the humans who taught those methods are gone." Zexai felt that cold feeling return to his stomach. He remembered visiting those agricultural worlds during trade missions. The local Kalari farmers had always complained about the strange methods humans insisted they use. Crop rotation, soil testing, careful water management, all very different from the traditional Kalari approach of simply planting and harvesting the same crops in the same places. For generations, the humans had been patient teachers. They explained that soil needed time to recover. They showed how different crops could help each other grow. They brought new techniques that increased harvests by enormous amounts. The Kelari had adopted these methods because they worked, but they never really understood the science behind them. Now the human agricultural advisors were gone. The local farmers had continued using the human methods for the first few months, but small mistakes had added up. Without human guidance, the carefully balanced systems were falling apart. "This is just a temporary setback," Chancellor Vorthok announced to the chamber. "Our own agricultural experts will solve these problems. We do not need human assistance." But even as he spoke, more reports were coming in. Mining operations in the asteroid belts were having safety problems without human oversight. Trade routes that humans had established were becoming unstable as old conflicts between species began to surface again. The efficient supply chains that had kept the Council's economy running smoothly were breaking down, piece by piece. Zexai listened to the reports and felt a growing sense of dread. The humans had not just been annoying council members who asked too many questions. They had been the glue holding the galaxy together in ways that no one had understood until they were gone. The most disturbing report came from the Outer Rim territories. Long-range sensors had detected unknown ships moving in the deep space beyond the galactic edge. Large ships with energy signatures that did not match any known species. The sensor stations that first spotted them had gone silent shortly after, sending their reports. As the council session continued into the night with more bad news and no good solutions, Zexai found himself thinking about the quiet humans who had worked so hard to keep everything running smoothly. They had departed in silence without anger or threats. They had simply walked away from a galaxy that had never appreciated what they did. Now that galaxy was beginning to understand the true cost of their loss. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was falling apart faster than anyone had imagined. Commander Vexner of the Kalari Defense Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the destruction of Harvest Moon Colony. Through the main viewer, what had once been a thriving agricultural world was now a wasteland of brown fields and empty storage silos. The colonists were loading onto evacuation ships with whatever possessions they could carry. "How many worlds is that now?" he asked his aide, a young Kalari officer named Jikstar. 17 agricultural worlds have failed completely, Jikstar replied, his antenna twitching with nervousness. 23 more are reporting serious problems. The agricultural experts say the situation will only get worse. Vexner's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Kalari hegemony had ruled over hundreds of worlds for thousands of years. They were masters of organization and efficiency. How had everything gone wrong so quickly? The answer was always the same. The humans were gone. It had started small, just as Ambassador Zexhai had predicted in his reports. Crop failures here and there, equipment breakdowns that took longer to fix, communication delays between systems. The Council had insisted these were temporary problems that would solve themselves once proper order was restored. They were wrong. The agricultural crisis was the worst disaster. The humans had spent years teaching new farming methods to species. Across the galaxy, they showed how to rotate crops, test soil, manage water systems, and control pests without destroying the land. These methods had increased food production by enormous amounts, allowing the Council to support billions more citizens than ever before. But the humans had not just taught the methods. They had also provided the constant guidance needed to make them work. Human agricultural advisors traveled between worlds, helping local farmers adjust to changing conditions. They monitored soil health, weather patterns, and crop diseases. They solved problems before they became disasters. Now, those advisors were gone, and the carefully maintained systems were collapsing. Local farmers tried to continue using human methods, but they made small mistakes that grew into big problems. Soil became poisoned, crops failed, water systems broke down. Entire worlds that had fed millions of people were becoming uninhabitable. The Kalari government had sent their own agricultural experts to fix the problems. These experts were highly trained in traditional Kalari farming methods that had worked for generations, but they did not understand the human techniques. They tried to apply old solutions to new problems and only made things worse. Dixner was pulled from his thoughts by an urgent signal from the communications officer. "Commander, we are receiving a priority message from Fleet Command. There is a situation in the Vega sector." The main viewer switched to show Admiral Craigful, the Supreme Commander of the Kalari Defense Fleet. The old warrior's scales were darker than usual, which meant he was either angry or worried. Probably both. "Commander Dexner, change course immediately to Vega 7. We have lost contact with 3 mining stations in the asteroid belt. Long-range sensors detected unknown ships in the area before the stations went dark." Dexner felt his blood go cold. "Unknown ships, Admiral? What species?" "That is the problem. The energy signatures do not match any known Council species. The ships appear to be very large and very advanced. Send all available data to the Science Division for analysis." The transmission ended, leaving Dexner staring at the star map. Vega 7 was on the outer edge of Kalari space, far from any major trade routes. The mining stations there extracted rare metals from the asteroid fields that were used in ship construction and advanced technology. They were heavily defended and equipped with the best sensors the Kalari military could provide. If something had destroyed those stations without sending a distress call, it was very dangerous indeed. The journey to Vega 7 took 3 days, at maximum warp. When Dexner's fleet arrived, they found a scene of total destruction. The 3 mining stations were gone. Not damaged or abandoned, completely gone. Only scattered debris remained floating in the asteroid field where massive installations had once operated. "Run full sensor sweeps," Dexner ordered. "I want to know what happened here." The science officer, a brilliant young Kalari named Zixana, worked at her station for several minutes before reporting. "Commander, the debris patterns are very strange. The stations appear to have been consumed, broken down into component materials at the molecular level." Consumed? Dexner had never heard of a weapon that could consume matter. By what? Unknown. But I am detecting traces of an unusual energy signature in the debris field. The computer cannot identify it, but... Zixana paused and looked troubled. "The signature appears in our historical databases. Very old records from the Imperial Archive." Dexner moved to her station. The Imperial Archive contained records going back thousands of years to the early days of the Kalori hegemony. If the signature was in those old files, it meant they were dealing with something ancient. What do the records say? Zixana's antenna drooped as she read from her screen. The signature is associated with something called the Devourers. According to these files, they were machine intelligences that appeared from deep space approximately 3,000 years ago. They consumed entire star systems before mysteriously disappearing into the void. Why did they disappear? The records do not say. They just note that the Devourer attacks stopped suddenly and the machines were never seen again. Wexner stared at the debris field where 3 heavily defended mining stations had once operated. If the ancient Devourers had returned, the galaxy was in serious trouble. The historical records described them as nearly unstoppable. Even the combined might of all Council species in their prime had barely been able to slow them down. "Send an immediate report to Fleet Command," he ordered. "Request all available information about the Devourers from the Imperial Archive, and contact the other Council species. If these machines have returned, we need to work together." But even as he gave the orders, Wexner knew it would not be enough. The Council species had grown soft and comfortable over the centuries of peace. Their military forces were designed to fight other conventional armies, not ancient machine intelligences. That could consume matter itself. The humans would have known what to do. They always seemed to have plans for impossible situations. Their military leaders thought in ways that other species found strange but effective. They prepared for threats that seemed unlikely until they actually happened. Over the next few weeks, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Devourers were active again, appearing without warning to consume mining stations, research outposts, and small colonies on the outer rim. They seemed to focus on areas with advanced technology or strategic resources. The Council's response was swift but ineffective. Massive fleets were assembled and sent to intercept the Devourer ships. The battles were disasters. The alien machines used weapons and tactics that the Council forces could not counter. Traditional military doctrine was useless against enemies that could adapt instantly to any strategy. Worse, the Devourers seemed to learn from each encounter. They began anticipating Council tactics and setting traps. Entire fleets vanished without sending distress calls. The outer territories became a war zone where no civilian ship dared to travel. In desperation, the Council began searching through all available historical records for information about the ancient Devourer War. What they found was disturbing. The records were incomplete, with large gaps during the critical period when the Devourers had disappeared. It was as if someone had deliberately removed key information from the archives. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A Draconi research team analyzing wreckage from a destroyed Devourer ship found something hidden in the debris: a human data core. The device was heavily encrypted and bore the markings of human military intelligence. When the code was finally broken, the data core contained detailed information about Devourer technology, tactics, and weaknesses. It also contained something else: evidence that the humans had been fighting the Devourers in secret for over 200 years. While the Council had focused on politics and trade, the humans had been the galaxy's silent guardians. They had discovered the Devourer threat long before anyone else and had spent generations preparing for their return. The human military had developed specialized weapons, defensive systems, and battle tactics specifically designed to fight the ancient machines. Most shocking of all, the data revealed that the Devourers had never really disappeared. They had been testing the galaxy's defenses for centuries, probing for weaknesses. The humans had been intercepting these scouts and maintaining a defensive perimeter that the Council never knew existed. Now that perimeter was gone, the humans had taken their knowledge, their weapons, and their defenses with them when they left. The galaxy was naked before an enemy it did not understand, fighting a war it was not prepared for. As Wexner read the intelligence reports in his private quarters, he felt the weight of terrible understanding. The humans had not just been annoying Council members who asked too many questions. They had been protectors, standing watch against threats the other species were. Intelligence analyst Wexner had spent her entire career studying enemy threats for the Galactic Council. She was very good at finding patterns in data that others missed. But nothing in her training had prepared her for what she was discovering. About the humans. The secure archive room deep beneath the council headquarters was filled with data cores, memory banks, and classified files from a dozen different species. Vexmyra had been working here for 3 weeks, trying to piece together the truth about the Devourer War. What she found changed everything she thought. She knew about the galaxy. The first clue came from old Thaxoni military records. The Thaxoni were proud warriors who kept detailed logs of every battle and military operation. Their archives went back over 1,000 years. Hidden in routine patrol reports, Vexmyra found references to human ships in places where humans should not have been. Patrol near the Galactic Rim in 2387 reported encountering a human research vessel conducting mineral surveys in an empty system. The Thaxoni commander noted that the humans were evasive about their real purpose and carried military-grade sensors that seemed too advanced for simple mining work. Another report from 2401 described a human convoy near the edge of known space. When questioned, the humans claimed they were establishing a new trade route. But the convoy included warships and mobile repair platforms, equipment needed for military operations, not peaceful commerce. There were dozens of similar reports, spread across centuries. Human ships appearing in remote locations with explanations that did not quite make sense. Always polite, always cooperative, but always secretive about their true missions. Vexmyra cross-referenced these reports with Devourer activity logs and found something terrifying. Every time the ancient machines had probed into council space, human ships had been in the area. Not after the incidents were reported, but before they happened. The humans had somehow known where the Devourers would strike. The second breakthrough came from accessing the personal files of Ambassador Sarah Chun. The human diplomat had left most of her official records behind when humanity withdrew from the council. But buried in her personal communications were coded messages that told a very different story. Chan had not just been a diplomatic representative. She had been a military intelligence officer, coordinating humanity's secret war against the Devourers, while maintaining her cover as a peaceful ambassador. Her reports to Human Command revealed the scope of their operations. The humans had built a network of hidden bases throughout the Galactic Rim, automated defense platforms disguised as research stations, weapon stockpiles hidden in asteroid fields, early warning systems that monitor deep space for Devourer activity, an entire military infrastructure that the Council had never suspected existed. But the most shocking discovery was in Chun's final report, sent just days before humanity's withdrawal. She had learned about the Council's secret plans to reduce human influence and eventually expel them from the Alliance. The vote to formally remove humanity had been scheduled for the following month. Chun's message to Human Command was brief and cold. They want us gone. Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. Withdraw all assets and personnel. Let them handle the Devourers alone. Vexmyra stared at the words on her screen. Protocol 7. She had found references to it in other human files, but the details were always classified above her access level. Whatever it was, it represented humanity's final contingency plan for leaving the galaxy to its fate. The third piece of evidence came from the most unlikely source. Maintenance records from the orbital stations around Nexus Prime. Vexmyra had requested them on a hunch, thinking the humans might have left behind some clue about their defensive systems. What she found was much more disturbing. For over 50 years, human technical teams had been making routine maintenance visits to every major communications relay in council space. They had installed what they called efficiency upgrades that improved signal quality and reduced power consumption. But when Vexmyra analyzed the technical specifications of these upgrades, she realized they were not just improvements. They were backdoors. The humans had quietly gained access to the entire galactic communication network. They could monitor any transmission, intercept any message, or shut down communications across entire sectors. Even worse, these backdoors were how the humans had been tracking Devourer movements. The ancient machines used advanced communication techniques that normal sensors could not detect. But the modified relay stations could pick up their signals and track their locations across vast distances. When The humans left. They had taken this capability with them. The Council was now fighting an enemy they could not see coming. Vexmira compiled her findings into a classified report and requested an immediate meeting with the Council leadership. She expected surprise, perhaps anger at the extent of human deception. She did not expect the reaction she received. Chancellor Vorthuk read her report in silence, his compound eyes growing darker with each page. When he finished, he set the document aside and looked at her with what might have been fear. "How long have you known about this?" he asked quietly. "I discovered it over the past 3 weeks while investigating the Devour threat," Vexmira replied. "Chancellor, the implications are enormous. The humans were not just council members. They were protecting us from threats we never knew existed." "Yes," Vorthuk said slowly, "we know." Vexmira stared at him. "You know? How long have you known?" "The council leadership has been aware of some human activities for several years," Vorthuk admitted. "We knew they operated ships in restricted areas. We suspected they had access to our communication networks. We chose to overlook these activities because they seemed harmless." "Harmless?" Vexmira could not believe what she was hearing. They were fighting a war to protect the entire galaxy. "How is that harmless?" "Because we did not think the threat was real," another voice said from behind her. Vexmira turned to see Sub-Chancellor Grimm entering the room. The Draconi leader looked older than she remembered, his scales dull with exhaustion. "The Council Intelligence Services identified the Devourer threat decades ago," Grimm continued. "We knew the ancient machines were still active in deep space. We also knew the humans were intercepting them before they could reach inhabited systems." "Then why did you plan to expel humanity from the Council?" Vexmira demanded. "Because we believed we could handle the threat ourselves if necessary," Vorthuk replied. "The humans made the Devourer problem seem manageable. They never lost a battle against the machines. We assumed their tactics could be replicated by our own forces. We were wrong," Grimm added bitterly. "The humans did not just have better tactics. They had better everything. Weapons designed specifically to fight the Devourers, ships built to survive their attacks, strategies developed over centuries of secret warfare. When they left, they took 200 years of accumulated knowledge with them." Vexmira felt sick. The Council had known about humanity's protection and had thrown it away out of pride and political convenience. They had convinced themselves that they could replace human expertise with their own forces when the time came. "How many other people knew about this?" she asked. "Very few," Vorthuk admitted. "Most council members believed the humans were simply being disruptive and difficult. Only the intelligence services and senior military leaders knew the truth about their activities." "And you said nothing when the withdrawal vote was being planned?" "We tried," Grimm said quietly. "Several of us argued against reducing human influence, but we could not reveal the real reasons without exposing classified operations. The majority of the Council believed the humans were a political problem that needed to be solved." Vexmira understood now why the humans had left so suddenly and completely. They had spent centuries protecting species that did not appreciate their sacrifice. They had been planning for expulsion by the very people they were defending. When they learned about the Council's true intentions, they had simply decided to stop wasting their efforts on an ungrateful galaxy. "Is there any way to contact them?" she asked. "To ask them to return?" "We have tried," Vorthuk replied. "All human space has gone completely dark. No responses to any communications. No ships entering or leaving their territory. Our scout vessels that approach the human border simply disappear." "Then we are truly alone against the Devourers," Vexmira said. "Yes," Grimm nodded, "and they are winning." The latest reports were devastating. 17 more systems had fallen in the past week. The Devourer fleets were advancing toward the core worlds, consuming everything in their path. The Council's military forces were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Panic was spreading through the civilian population as refugees from the outer territories brought tales of worlds stripped bare and populations consumed. The proud Galactic Council, rulers of thousands of systems, was being forced to abandon territory that had been theirs for millennia. As Vexmira left the meeting, she thought about the humans who had fought in silence to protect people who never knew they needed protection. They had been called disruptive and difficult by species whose existence they had preserved. They had been voted out of power by governments they had kept safe. General Corextel stood on the observation deck of the Council Defense Platform Alpha, watching the last evacuation ships flee from the Centauri system. Behind them, the Devourer fleet consumed everything that remained. Planets, moons, space, stations, even the system's star was being drained of energy to feed the ancient machines. In just 8 months since the humans left, the Galactic Council had lost over 300 star systems. What had once been the largest and most powerful civilization in the galaxy was now a shrinking collection of core worlds surrounded by an advancing enemy that seemed unstoppable. Corextel was the supreme military commander of all Council forces. He had led armies for over 40 years and had never lost a major campaign, but this war was different. Every strategy he tried failed. Every weapon the Council deployed proved useless. The Devourers adapted to each new tactic within hours and struck back with devastating effectiveness. "General, the evacuation of Centauri 7 is complete," his aide reported. "All civilian personnel have been relocated to the inner systems. How many refugees are we handling now?" Corextel asked without taking his eyes off the destruction outside. "Over 2 billion displaced persons across 17 temporary shelter worlds," the aide replied. "The logistics division says we cannot support many more without serious supply shortages. 2 billion refugees." The number was staggering. These were not just statistics in a report. They were farmers, teachers, children, families who had lived peaceful lives until the Devourers arrived to consume their worlds. Now they crowded into refugee camps and abandoned buildings, hoping the Council could protect them, but the Council was failing. Every day brought news of another defeat, another system lost, another million people forced to flee their homes. The proud military that had maintained peace for centuries was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they could not understand. "Sir, we have an incoming transmission from Fleet Admiral Zexhai," the communications officer announced. "Priority 1 encryption." Corextel moved to the secure communication console. Admiral Zexhai commanded the 3rd Defense Fleet, one of the largest remaining Council military forces. His fleet was currently defending the approach to the Vega sector, trying to slow the Devourer advance toward the core worlds. Zexhai's image appeared on the screen, but the proud Veletarian officer looked exhausted. His uniform was stained and his forearms shook with fatigue. Behind him, Corextel could see damage control teams working frantically to repair his flagship. "General, I must report the complete failure of Operation Iron Wall," Zexhai said without preamble. "The Devourers have broken through our defensive line at Vega. My fleet has suffered 70% casualties. I am falling back to the secondary positions, but I do not think we can hold them there either." Operation Iron Wall had been Corextel's latest attempt to stop the Devourer advance. He had positioned 3 full fleets in a defensive formation, designed to channel the enemy ships into carefully prepared kill zones. The plan had used every tactical principle taught in Council military academies for centuries. It lasted less than 6 hours against the Devourers. "What went wrong?" Corextel asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Everything, sir," Zexhai replied bitterly. "The Devourers did not attack our defensive positions as predicted. Instead, they split their forces and attacked from 12 different directions simultaneously. When we tried to reposition to meet these attacks, they used some kind of jamming system that disrupted our communications. Our ships could not coordinate their movements." "What about the new particle weapons?" Corextel had hoped the Council's latest weapons technology might prove effective against the ancient machines. Useless, the Devourer ships adapted their shields. After the first few hits, by the end of the battle, our weapons were barely scratching their hulls. But their weapons... Zexhai paused, and Corextel could see the horror in his eyes. "General, they have weapons that can consume matter at the molecular level. I watched them dissolve a heavy cruiser in seconds. The crew did not even have time to scream. Corextel closed his eyes. He had read the reports about Devourer weapons, but hearing the description from a veteran commander made the reality more terrible. The Council was fighting an enemy with technology so advanced that their own weapons seemed primitive by comparison. "How long can you hold the secondary positions?" he asked. "Maybe a week, sir." 2 weeks if we get reinforcements. But honestly, I do not think it will matter. The Devourers learn from every battle. They are getting better at fighting us while we are getting worse at fighting them. The transmission ended, leaving Corextel alone with his thoughts. HFY was right. The Devourers were learning. Every time the Council tried a new strategy, the ancient machines found a way to counter it. They seemed to understand Council tactics better than the Council understood theirs. It was as if the Devourers had been studying them for years, learning their weaknesses and preparing for this moment, which, Corextel realized with growing horror, was probably exactly what had happened. According to the intelligence reports that Vexmera had compiled, the Devourers had been probing the galaxy for centuries. They had been testing Council defenses, studying their technology, and mapping their response patterns. The humans had intercepted most of these probes, but some had surely gotten through. The ancient machines had used that time to prepare for a war against an enemy they understood completely. The Council, meanwhile, had been fighting an enemy they knew nothing about. It was not a war. It was an execution. A new signal interrupted his thoughts. This time it was Chancellor Vorthok calling from the Emergency Command Center on Nexus Prime. The Kellari leader looked haggard, his once proud mandibles clicking nervously as he spoke. "General, I need a full assessment of our military situation. The civilian government is demanding answers about when this war will end." Corextel almost laughed at the question. When would it end? It would end when the last Council world was consumed and the last Council citizen was dead. Unless something changed dramatically, that would happen within the next few months. "Chancellor, our position is not sustainable," he said carefully. "We have lost 40% of our military strength, and the Devourers show no signs of slowing down. Our current defensive strategies are ineffective against their technology and tactics." "Then develop new strategies," Vorthok demanded. "You are supposed to be our greatest military mind. Find a way to defeat them." Corextel felt a flash of anger. The politicians who had driven away humanity now expected the military to somehow fix the disaster they had created. They wanted simple solutions to impossible problems. "Chancellor, we are not fighting a conventional enemy," he replied. "The Devourers have technology and capabilities that we cannot match. They have been studying us for centuries while we knew nothing about them. We need the humans to return if we want any chance of survival. The humans will not answer our communications," Vorthok said. "We must assume they are not coming back." "Then we need to find them," Corextel insisted. "Send ships into human space. Make contact with their colonies. Offer them whatever they want in exchange for their help. We have tried that. Every scout ship we send toward human territory disappears. Our long-range sensors cannot detect any human activity in their former territories. It is as if they have vanished completely." Corextel stared at the tactical display showing the Devourer advance. Red markers indicated enemy positions while blue markers showed the shrinking Council territory. At the current rate of advance, the Devourers would reach the core worlds within 3 months. "Chancellor, I must be honest with you," he said finally. "Without human assistance, we cannot win this war. We can delay the Devourers for a few more weeks, maybe months if we are lucky. But ultimately, they will consume every world in Council space." The silence on the communication channel stretched for long seconds. When Vorthok spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "How many people can we evacuate to the Outer Rim territories?" "Maybe 10% of the population, if we start immediately and use every available ship," Corextel replied. "But the Outer Rim is where the Devourers came from. There is nowhere to run, Chancellor. This enemy does not want our territory or our resources. They want to consume everything that exists." After the transmission ended, Corextel remained on. The observation deck, watching the distant flashes of light that marked another battle in humanity's former defensive perimeter. The irony was not lost on him. The Council was now fighting desperately to hold positions that the humans had defended effortlessly for centuries, but the humans were gone, taking with them 200 years of knowledge about fighting the Devourers. They had left behind a galaxy that had rejected their protection and now faced extinction without a dot in the distance. Another star system went dark as the Devourers consumed it completely. Soon, Horextel knew it would be his turn to face the ancient machines in battle. He only hoped he could buy enough time for some small part of Galactic civilization to survive, though he was beginning to doubt that was possible. The Council chambers had never been so quiet. 10 months after humanity's departure, only 7 species remained at the emergency session. The others had either fallen to the Devourers or fled so far into the outer rim that communication was impossible. Chancellor Vorthok sat at the head of the great table, his once proud mandibles now clicking nervously as he read the latest casualty reports. 412 star systems lost. Over 8 billion refugees displaced. The remaining Council fleets down to 15% of their original strength the Devourers would reach. Nexus Prime within 2 weeks. We must discuss evacuation procedures, Sub-Chancellor Grimm said quietly. The old Draconi scales had turned, completely gray with stress. The civilian population cannot be defended here. Where would we go? Asked Representative Nixara of the Zephyrian Alliance. There is nowhere left to run. The Devourers have consumed everything in the outer territories. The core worlds in the Andromeda sector might be safe, suggested Ambassador Keltash. If we could reach them before a loud chime interrupted the discussion. The chamber's main communication system was receiving an incoming transmission. The Council members looked at each other in confusion. All regular communication schedules had been suspended due to the crisis. Accept the transmission, Vorthok ordered. The air above the table shimmered and formed into a holographic image. A human woman in a simple gray uniform appeared before them. She was middle-aged with short dark hair and tired eyes that seemed to see everything. Good morning, Council members, she said in perfect trade language. I am Captain Sarah Chunov. The Terran Defense Corps, I believe we need to talk. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Several Council members had stopped breathing entirely. Sarah Chun had been humanity's last ambassador to the Council before the withdrawal. She was also, according to the intelligence reports, a high-ranking military officer who had coordinated humanity's secret war against the Devourers. Captain Chun, Vorthok managed to say, We have been trying to contact your people for months. Our messages received no response. That is correct, Chun replied calmly. We chose not to respond to your communications. However, current circumstances require us to make an exception. You know about the Devourers? Grimm said. It was not a question. We know about everything, Sub-Chancellor, Chun answered. We know that 412 systems have fallen. We know that your military forces have been reduced to scattered remnants. We know that Nexus Prime will be under attack within 14 standard days. Representative Nixara leaned forward desperately. Then you must help us. Your people have the knowledge and weapons to fight these machines. Surely you will not let billions of innocent civilians die. Chun's expression did not change. Why? Should we help you? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Several Council members began speaking at once, but Chun raised her hand for silence. Let me refresh your memory, she continued. 8 months before our departure, this Council voted to reduce human representation by 60%. 6 months before our departure, you passed legislation restricting human commercial activities in 12 sectors. 3 months before our departure, you scheduled a formal vote to expel humanity from the Council entirely. Those were political matters, Vorthok protested weakly. The threat from the Devourers changes everything, does it? Chun asked. Because from our perspective, nothing has changed at all. You still believe that humans are disruptive, inefficient, and primitive. You still think our methods are wrong and our ideas are dangerous. The only difference is that now you need us. Ambassador Keltash stood up angrily. Billions of people are dying. How can you be so cold? We are not cold, Chun replied. We are practical. For over 2 centuries, humanity fought to protect this galaxy while you complained about our methods. We saved your civilizations countless times while you plotted to remove us from power. We bled and died for species that never bothered to. Thank us. She paused and looked directly at each council member in turn. So I ask again, why should we help you now? The chamber fell silent. Nobody seemed to have an answer that would satisfy the human captain. Finally, Vorthak spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? An excellent question, Chun said. What we want is very simple. We want the Galactic Council to formally dissolve itself. The council members stared at her in shock. Dissolve the council? The organization had existed for over 3,000 years. It was the foundation of galactic civilization. You cannot be serious, Grimm protested. The council represents the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Without it, there would be chaos, would there? Chun asked mildly. Because from where we sit, the council has been the source of most galactic conflicts for the past 1,000 years. Your rigid hierarchies, your refusal to change, your treatment of lesser species as expendable resources. The galaxy might be better off without you. What would replace the council? Nixara demanded. A new alliance, Chun explained. One based on cooperation rather than domination. Equal representation for all species, regardless of their age or technology level. Democratic decision-making instead of rule by ancient aristocracies. She gestured, and the hologram expanded to show a star map. Several regions were highlighted in green. The species that treated humanity with respect have already been relocated to protected territories. They are safe from the Devourers and are helping to build this new alliance. Vorthak felt his mandibles clicking uncontrollably. You save some species but not others? We saved the species that deserve to be saved, Chun said simply. The ones that believed in equality and cooperation? The ones that stood up for smaller civilizations instead of exploiting them? The ones that treated humans as partners rather than useful tools? The implications hit the council members like a physical blow. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy. They had abandoned the council. They had carefully selected which civilizations were worth preserving and which could be left to face the consequences of their own arrogance. The Zephyrian colonies in the outer spiral, Nixara said suddenly. They went dark 3 months ago. We thought the Devourers had taken them. They were evacuated to human space, Chun confirmed. Along with the Andromedan research stations, the Centauri agricultural worlds, and 47 other populations that met our criteria for relocation. What criteria? Grimm asked. Simple ones? Did they practice slavery? Did they exploit weaker species? Did they support the Council's plans to marginalize humanity? Did they treat all citizens with basic dignity regardless of species or caste? Hyun's voice grew colder. Most Council species failed these tests badly, Representative Keltash was shaking with rage. You had no right to decide who lives and who dies. Did we not? Chun asked. Because that is exactly what the Council has been doing for centuries. You decided that humans were too disruptive to remain in power. You decided that democratic reforms were too dangerous to implement. You decided that your ancient traditions were more important than justice or equality. She looked around the chamber one final time. We simply made different decisions. The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Chancellor Vorthak spoke in a defeated voice. If we agreed to dissolve the Council and join this new alliance, will you help us fight? The Devourers? The Devourers are no longer your problem, Chun said quietly. They are already being dealt with. A new image appeared in the hologram, a view of space near the galactic rim. Dozens of sleek ships were engaging a Devourer fleet. But these were not the desperate defensive battles the Council forces had been fighting. The human ships moved. With precision and coordination, their weapons tearing through Devourer hulls like paper. How? Grimm whispered. We never stopped fighting them, Chun explained. When we withdrew from Council space, we did not abandon our defensive positions. We simply stopped protecting civilizations that did not appreciate our efforts. The Devourers you have been fighting were allowed through our perimeter deliberately. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Humanity had not just left the galaxy to its fate. They had actively allowed the Devourers to attack the Council species while protecting the ones they deemed worthy. It was not abandonment, it was judgment. The remaining Devourer fleets will be eliminated within the next 72 hours, Chun continued. The threat to this galaxy will end. What happens next depends on your choice. She stood up, preparing to end the transmission. You have until the Devourers reach Nexus Prime to decide. Dissolve the Council and join our alliance as equal partners. Or face extinction alone. We will not make this offer again. The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the Council members alone with their thoughts and their choice. Outside the chamber windows, the first evacuation ships were already lifting off from Nexus Prime, carrying the last hope of galactic civilization toward an uncertain future. The humans had departed in silence, and the galaxy had learned that some things were too precious to lose until they were already gone.